In 1853, a frustrated chef in Saratoga Springs, New York, was about to create something that would change the way humanity eats forever. But he didn't mean to. He was angry. A wealthy customer had just sent back his fried potatoes for the third time, complaining they were too thick, too soggy, not crispy enough. The chef, George Crumb, was furious. So he decided to teach this demanding customer a lesson. He sliced the potatoes as thin as paper, fried them until they were hard as glass, drowned them in salt, and sent them back as an insult. The customer loved them. And with that act of kitchen revenge, George Crumb accidentally invented the potato chip, a snack that would eventually generate over $27 billion a year in global sales and become one of the most consumed foods on the planet. But this story isn't just about potatoes or profit. It's about how a moment of pure frustration, a petty act of culinary spite, cascaded into something that would reshape global agriculture, food science, advertising, and even the way we socialize. It's a perfect example of the butterfly effect in action. One angry chef, one thin slice, one irritated moment, and suddenly the entire world is eating differently. Let me take you back to understand how something so massive could start from something so small and so bitter. America in the 1850s was a nation on the edge of transformation. The Industrial Revolution was accelerating. Railroads were connecting cities that once took weeks to reach. Factories were rising. Immigration was surging. And with all this change came a new class of wealthy Americans who had money to spend and a taste for luxury. Saratoga Springs was one of their playgrounds. Nestled in upstate New York, it was famous for its natural mineral springs, its horse racing, and its high society gatherings. The wealthy would travel there to see and be seen, to gamble, to dine in elegant restaurants, and to enjoy foods that signaled status and refinement. Moon's Lake House was one of those restaurants. It was upscale, popular, frequented by the kind of people who expected perfection on their plates. And working in that kitchen was George Crumb, a chef of mixed African American and Native American heritage. Crumb was talented, proud of his cooking, and known for his skill with game and seafood. But he was also known for having a temper. In a time and place where Black and Indigenous people faced brutal discrimination, Crumb had carved out a position of respect through sheer culinary talent. But respect didn't mean he was immune to the whims of entitled customers. And one summer evening in 1853, one particular customer pushed him too far. The details vary slightly depending on who tells the story, but the core remains the same. A customer, some say it was the railroad magnate Cornelius Vanderbilt himself, ordered fried potatoes. This was a common dish. Potatoes had been fried in various forms across Europe for decades. French fries, as we might recognize them, were already being served in parts of America. They were thick, soft on the inside, golden on the outside. Comfort food. But this customer wasn't satisfied. He sent them back. Too thick. Crumb made them thinner. The customer sent them back again. Still not right. By the third rejection, Crumb had had enough. He went back into the kitchen, seething. He wasn't going to take another insult from some rich man who thought he could dictate every detail of a meal. So Crumb grabbed a knife and sliced the potatoes as thin as he possibly could. Paper thin, almost translucent. Then he dropped them into boiling oil and let them fry until they were crisp, brittle, impossible to eat with a fork. He pulled them out, shook off the excess oil, and dumped an excessive amount of salt on them. This wasn't food. This was a message. This was Crumb saying, "You want thin? I'll give you thin. You want crispy? Here's crispy. Now choke on it." He sent the plate out fully expecting the customer to be outraged, maybe even storm out. But the opposite happened. The customer took one bite and his face lit up. He loved them. He ordered more. Other diners at nearby tables noticed. They wanted to try them too. Within days, these impossibly thin, salty, crunchy potato slices became the most requested item at Moon's Lake House. Crumb had to keep making them. They became known as Saratoga chips, and word spread fast. What George Crumb didn't realize in that moment of spite was that he had stumbled onto something profound about human taste. The combination of salt, fat, and crunch triggered something primal in the brain. It activated pleasure centers. It created what food scientists would later call a bliss point, a perfect ratio of ingredients that makes you want more even when you're full. The thinness meant more surface area, which meant more crunch, more salt, more oil absorbed. Every bite delivered maximum flavor and maximum satisfaction. And because they were so light and crispy, they didn't feel heavy. You could eat 10 and still want more. Crumb had accidentally engineered the perfect snack food. But here's the thing. George Crumb never patented his creation. He never tried to mass produce it. He just kept making Saratoga chips for the guests at Moon's Lake House, and later at his own restaurant, Crumb's House, which he opened in the 1860s. The chips remained a regional delicacy, something you had to travel to Saratoga Springs to experience. For decades, that's all they were. A local specialty, a novelty. Most of America had no idea they existed. Crumb lived a successful life as a respected chef. But he died in 1914 without ever seeing his accidental invention become a national phenomenon. Because the next phase of this story required something Crumb didn't have: industrial-scale production and ruthless business ambition. In the early 1900s, potato chips were still being made in small batches, sold in barrels or tins, mostly in the northeastern United States. They were fragile, they went stale quickly, and they couldn't travel far. But then came a woman named Laura Scudder. In 1926, in Monterey Park, California, Scudder had an idea that seems obvious now, but was revolutionary then. She started packaging potato chips in wax paper bags. Before this, chips were scooped out of large containers, exposed to air, moisture, and contamination. Scudder's bags kept them fresh, made them portable, and turned them into a product that could sit on a shelf and be sold in grocery stores. Suddenly, potato chips weren't just a restaurant treat. They were a consumer product. They could be branded, marketed, distributed across states. Other entrepreneurs saw the potential. In 1932, Herman Lay started selling chips out of the trunk of his car in the southern United States. By 1938, he had built a successful distribution network. In 1961, his company merged with Frito to form Frito-Lay, which would become the largest snack food company in the world. Meanwhile, on the East Coast, companies like Wise and Utz were expanding. Advertising became aggressive. Chips were marketed as the perfect companion for parties, for lunchboxes, for road trips, for any occasion. They were cheap to produce and sold at high margins. The profits were enormous. And then came flavor innovation. For the first time, companies started experimenting beyond just salt. In the 1950s, barbecue-flavored chips appeared. In the 1960s, sour cream and onion. In the UK, cheese and onion became wildly popular. Each new flavor expanded the market. People who didn't like plain chips suddenly had options. And with each innovation, consumption increased. By the 1980s, potato chips were a multi-billion-dollar global industry. They were everywhere. Gas stations, vending machines, school cafeterias, movie theaters. They were no longer a snack. They were a staple. But this massive success came with consequences that George Crumb could never have imagined. The demand for potatoes skyrocketed. Farmers started dedicating more and more land to potato cultivation. Entire agricultural economies shifted to meet the needs of chip manufacturers. New potato varieties were developed specifically for chip production. Breeds that were starchier, less watery, more uniform in size. Pesticides and fertilizers became essential to maintain the massive yields required. The environmental footprint grew exponentially. Then there was the health impact. Potato chips are delicious because they are engineered to be, they hit every pleasure point, but they are also calorie-dense, high in sodium, often fried in oils that contain unhealthy fats. As portion sizes increased and consumption became daily rather than occasional, chips became a significant contributor to rising obesity rates, heart disease, and hypertension. Public health experts started warning about snack foods. Governments debated regulations, but the industry was too big, too profitable, and too deeply embedded in culture to be slowed down. And the psychology of it all? That's where things get really interesting. Food scientists working for chip companies spent decades studying how to make their products as addictive as possible. They researched the perfect crunch frequency, the ideal salt crystal size, the exact oil temperature that produces maximum flavor. They tested thousands of variations to find the combinations that made people unable to stop eating. It wasn't an accident that you can't eat just one chip. It was deliberate design. These companies employed neuroscientists, chemists, and marketing psychologists to create products that hijacked the brain's reward system. Today, potato chips are a $27 billion industry in the United States alone. Globally, the figure is over $30 billion. Frito-Lay controls nearly 60% of the U.S. market. Americans consume about 1.85 billion pounds of potato chips every year. That's roughly 6 pounds per person. In some countries, the numbers are even higher. The chip aisle in a modern supermarket can stretch for 30 feet or more, offering hundreds of varieties, flavors, textures, and brands. What started as an act of anger in a kitchen in 1853 has become one of the most powerful food industries on Earth. But here's what strikes me most about this story. George Crumb had no idea. He wasn't trying to invent anything. He was just a chef who got fed up with a rude customer and decided to be petty about it. He sliced some potatoes too thin out of spite. And that one small, angry decision set off a chain reaction that took over a century to fully unfold. It required other people, other innovations, other moments of insight to turn his kitchen mistake into a global phenomenon. Laura Scudder's packaging, Herman Lay's distribution network. Food scientists perfecting flavor. Advertisers creating desire. It took all of that for Crumb's accidental invention to reach its full potential. And that's the real butterfly effect. It's not just that small actions have big consequences. It's that those consequences are unpredictable, often delayed, and dependent on countless other factors aligning in ways no one can foresee. Crumb couldn't have known that his chips would outlive him by over a century. He couldn't have known they would change agriculture, health, and culture worldwide. He was just trying to get through a frustrating day at work. So the next time you open a bag of chips, think about that. Think about the angry chef in 1853 who sliced a potato too thin. Think about how that moment of frustration traveled through time, through innovation, through capitalism, through human psychology, and ended up in your hand. Think about how many people's lives were touched by that one decision. The farmers growing potatoes, the factory workers frying them, the truck drivers delivering them, the advertisers selling them, the scientists studying them, the doctors treating the health effects. All of it traces back to one man having a bad day in a kitchen. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What small things are we doing right now, out of anger or frustration or accident, that might ripple out in ways we can't imagine? What kitchen mistakes are we making today that will feed billions tomorrow? We'll never know until it happens. And maybe that's the most humbling part of the butterfly effect. We're all George Crumb. We're all just trying to get through our days, reacting to whatever frustrates or inspires us. And we have no idea which of our actions will echo into the future. If this story made you think differently about the small moments in your own life, do me a favor. Leave a like on this video so more people can discover it. And subscribe to this channel because every week I bring you another true story of how tiny decisions change the world in massive ways. These are the moments history forgets, but that shaped everything we know. And I think they're worth remembering. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.